You're listening to Alamo City Limits Podcast with Noah Magaro-George, the official San Antonio Spurs podcast of Pounding the Rock in SB Nation.
What's going on, San Antonio Spurs fans? Welcome back to Alamo City Limits, the official San Antonio Spurs podcast of SB Nation and Pounding the Rock. Today, we're going to be talking about Jalen Johnson in the 2021 NBA Draft with a very special guest and my fellow Pounding the Rock writer, Walker Bailey. How are you doing today, Walker?
I'm good, man. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited. You're the very first Pounding the Rock person besides myself on the Pounding the Rock pod. We definitely got to change that up. We got to bring more people on from our site. I like reading what you got. We've got a lot of other people who write some great stuff too. So I'm excited to talk draft with you. Let's go ahead and hop into the topic of today, which is Jalen Johnson. So the 2021 NBA draft, it's less than 2 weeks away. The Spurs have so many options to consider with the 12th pick. I know you like Jalen Johnson. So just sort of talk to me about why you think he makes sense for San Antonio in the lottery and sort of just like what you like about his game in general.
I'm a firm believer that the Spurs have a lot of like really solid guys built into their core that are like role guys. I don't really think there's a top line scoring option or even a second option on a championship team on this team. So I like Jalen Johnson just because his ability to score and play make in transition is really, really special. And then he's a plus defender. And, you know, he's really pretty good at everything except the jump shot's not really there. And like if you go through his numbers, like, okay, well, he shot 40+% from three, but it was low volume and he shot poorly at the free throw line. So like, you know, you can kind of 2+2 and kind of figure out he's just not a great shooter. The Spurs have a lot of success developing shooters. I just think that it would make a lot of sense if they went that route and then try to develop another jump shot and see if they couldn't get a high-level scorer out of Jalen Johnson because you already know everything else is there. Like he can defend, he can protect the rim, he play makes, he gets a great passer, great ball instincts. He's played in a system at Duke where he's been around a lot of other talent, so it's not like he's coming out of a college system where he's going to have to learn how to play with other players. He's already done it. And granted, he left early, and that's another discussion, but you know, I just think his skill set fits what San Antonio needs really well.
Yeah, I agree with you for the most part. I think they could probably also find it in somebody like Josh Giddey. Again, his shot is also pretty spotty, so I don't think I would want to bet necessarily, but they're both really young guys, and I'll kind of keep it with Jalen Johnson. You know, like you said, he's a dangerous passer and driver in transition. He puts pressure on the defense. He can make some solid decisions, you know, find a teammate by passing ahead, or he can sort of find the shooters. I really like that. I thought he was at his best in transition. And before we really transition to talking about some things that might worry me about his game, you know, I think that he has a lot of grab and go potential. You know, he's grabbing the rebound, going in transition. Cause like we said, he's best in transition. He's explosive vertical athlete when he's in space, or he has like a runway to the basket. And I think maybe there's some upside there that hasn't been completely tapped. Like I know we talk about guys being phenomenal athletes. I think he's just a good athlete at this point, but these guys are also young. You know, once they get with a professional, you know, sort of strength coach and the weight training staff, I think that there's some untapped potential there as well. And I like how he uses his body. You know, he's a strong kid. He can take advantage of mismatches in the post. I thought he showed some moves there occasionally. Now he wasn't really a great half court offense guy, but he was a really, really good cutter. What did you think about his cutting? And what did you think about his utilization as the roll man in the pick and roll? Because I thought he was pretty solid, even though it was a sort of small sample size there.
Yeah. So, I mean, but he's pretty good at both things. And the cutting is pretty special too. And kind of we're going back to what you said earlier about not being great in the half court. I mean, that's obviously something that needs to, you know, be developed. But the great thing about the NBA is it's so much more open now, and you're going to be out like in open floor a lot more than you are in college. It's not as set like in that half court where you're going to be in sets all the time. He's going to be able to use that athleticism more. And you talked about tapping potential. Well, that's a great way to do it, is like change. I mean, it's going to change his style of play and play to his strengths. But yeah, as far as the roll man and the pick and roll and cutting and stuff goes, he's pretty good at both things. I'd like to see him roll more, and I think he'll get to it in what's more becoming positionless basketball in the NBA, because he'll play a lot of the four too, probably. And cutting off the ball too. I mean, just again, like, I mean, playing the four or playing the three, if he's got, you know, small defenders, bigger defenders on him, he's going to be able to find shots and layups and quite frankly, passes and shots for other people just with his off the ball movement. And a lot of times you don't see college players knowing how to do that. Like there's a lot of, you know, there's just a lot of players that are stagnant. You watch college offenses, they don't move. It's a lot of ISO ball, and it's a product probably of just what you see in the NBA. But, you know, Jalen Johnson, and this is a Coach K thing. I mean, those are things that they build into their offense. There's no standing around. He knows exactly how to play off the ball. He knows how to play without the ball. And, he's not playing for his own shot. He's playing for the best shot for his team. And that's a really high quality thing. And sometimes you can't teach that. Like, it's hard to teach those intangibles.
Definitely, definitely. And I kind of want to go back to his defensive potential. So you said he's someone who you think is a really strong defender. How many positions do you think he can guard in the NBA? And, what did you like about his defense in particular? What stood out? Was it the man-to-man defense? Was it the team defense? What stood out to you?
I think he can guard 4. I'd be hesitant to say he could guard the 5. I think maybe like down the line, but right away I'd say he could guard 1 through 4. I mean, he's a really instinctual defender. He's smart. And then so if he gets beat maybe first step, he's really smart in his next step and recovering, and he's never just truly beat. And then he's really, really, really great at timing shots and blocking shots too, and making it really difficult and having strong contests. And that's really all you can ask for. Duke didn't play a ton of zone. And so and really the Spurs don't either. So if he's slotted here, I don't know how much that would actually be utilized, but his length would be a problem in that arena too, especially with his instincts, being able to jumping passing lanes and tip balls and just disrupt rhythm. And so, I mean, I think that's where he uses his length and he's really smart on the basketball court. And I think a lot of that is what plays into what makes him such a strong defensive player.
Definitely, definitely. And so I want to move on to sort of talking about maybe some of the concerns with his game. So we mentioned he is a strong defender, but I think he's strong more so in flashes. Like, I wasn't 100% buying into what he did. Like you said, he has some defensive playmaking potential, 4.5 stocks per 40 minutes. That's really impressive. He's getting his hands on the ball. He's really active. He's got good length. He's somebody who showed some really good instincts, especially as like a weak side rim protector. But one of the things that sort of bothered me was the fouls, 4.2 fouls per 40. And a lot of these fouls were not just like him making an effort to stay in front of somebody and oh, well, it's an effort foul, something like that. But there were a lot of lazy fouls, just lazy swipe downs, misguided reach-ins. He undercut players unintentionally. Obviously, he's not a dirty player or anything like that, but there were a lot of those fouls. And granted, a small sample size because he didn't stick at Duke all that long. Are those things that worry you at all for the next level? Do you think he's going to be somebody who may not be on the court that much because he's in foul trouble?
Well, I think it's hard to judge. Like, so Jalen Johnson played like probably 2/3 of a season at Duke, and he's an 18-year-old freshman. I mean, like, those are things like, and when you're taking an 18-year-old freshman with a 12th pick, I mean, there's going to be warts. I mean, you're not getting the best player in the draft. There's a reason he's going 12. And so I think it's just things like he's going to have to develop the consistency and the motor. And it may even just be like a mental motor. Like, I don't even know that he physically can't do it for an entire game. I just think he's going to, like, if he were to land in San Antonio, I just think they'd have to teach him and help him get into a place mentally where he can sit down and guard and play with that turn those flashes into consistency and turn that into defensive talent. And I'm a believer that he can do that. I don't really put a ton of weight in 18-year-olds having struggles against like older college guys and, at Duke or whatever, playing against the highest level of talent. I'm not super concerned about it. I think he's going to be a plus defender at the next level. But I could see where, like, if you were to tell me, hey, like, I don't like Jalen Johnson because like the defense worries me or like the foul trouble worries me, then I'd be like, okay, I can understand that concern. I just don't necessarily share it.
Sure. I think that's completely fair to not share that concern. Now, you say you think he's going to be a plus defender at the next level. How soon do you think that is? Because for me, again, there are some things that worried me, like the stuff that I mentioned. One of the other things that kind of worries me is his pick and roll defense. He was pretty bad. He was pretty often in no man's land, and then he was fixated on the ball handler a lot of times, lost the roll man, and then bam, 2 easy points at the rim. And he's really not that great against like smaller guards. His feet looked a little heavy at times. I don't know if it was so much of an effort thing or if it's an athleticism thing. It was sort of hard to tell. I wasn't sure how much he even really wanted to be at Duke towards the end. Obviously, he left the program. There was a sort of foot injury thing. But how quickly do you think if he does become, a plus defender, is it right away or are we looking like pretty far down the line?
I think it's somewhere in between. I don't think it's right away. I think you probably get to year 2 or 3. Like, I mean, you can kind of remember too, like when DeJounte Murray got drafted, like, I mean, the guy didn't come in and immediately become like this all defense, like level point guard that he is now. And I think it's something like that. Like, I think you'd probably see like year 1, he'd probably play and there would be struggles. Like, I mean, just like there was with Devin Vassell or any other rookie who plays in the league, there's going to be struggles. And then I think year 2, you would see a jump, and year 3, he would really be that dude. So, I mean, I think he's a project. He's going to take a minute, but I think by the time you get to that point, I think he's going to be a plus defender. I think it's probably year 2, you probably start to see more of that consistency. And then year 3, you probably start to see, okay, this is what he is. And if he's not a good defender by year 3, then I think it's like, okay, you have to ask the question, is he ever going to get there?
Yeah, I think that's also pretty fair. I'm not 100% like not sold that he's going to be a good defender. I think he has all the tools to be a good defender. He does have some versatility. I think he'll be guarding 3s and 4s from day one. I'm not worried about that. You know, he held his own against big men in college basketball. He was pretty physical. He was a physical guy, didn't back down from challenges. He had good positioning in the post.
Not at all scared of throwing his body around. And like, I think that may be a lot of why you get into foul trouble too, is you have to teach him how to do that, in a methodical and a smart way. You can't just always be throwing your body around. That's why he got in foul trouble. But there are situations like, I mean, he's not scared to go down with a 4 or a college 5 and be like, all right, I'm going to be here and I'm going to bang bodies with you. Like, he's not afraid of that. And I admire that. Like, that's great. A lot of college kids won't do that.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's not a lot of college kids who are doing that, especially he's 6'9", 220, 6'11" wingspan. I think those are some good measurables. It's not elite length. It's good length, but his frame is really nice. He's got a really, really nice frame. He's not someone who I'm super concerned about on the defensive end. I just sort of wanted to get your feel for some of the concerns that might be there. But I also wanted to talk about sort of what happened with the Blue Devils this year. Of course, we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, but I'm all for player empowerment, right? Like if a player wants to do what's best for them, especially in college basketball, where it's a system that's exploited players for years, I'm all for it. But does it worry you a little bit or not worry you? I think that's the wrong word to use, but do you think Pop in the front office would even really target this guy? I mean, we know that Pop has a good relationship with Coach K because of Team USA basketball. I'm sure there's a little bit of saltiness there with Coach K with how Jalen left the program. If anybody's going to be going to anyone for intel, Pop's going to be going to, Coach K, or the people who are doing the scouting are going to go directly to Coach K. Do you think they even target someone like that who doesn't necessarily have the best reputation with the Duke program and Coach K?
So I think what you have to do first, and this has always been mine, is I think you have to, if you really have interest in taking Jalen Johnson, the first thing they need to do is sit down and talk to him. Like, talk to the player first, ask him those questions, and then you can come back as a front office in the scouting department and say, okay, here's what the kid told us. And like, here's like how we took his answers. How do we feel about that? Like, does it make sense? Do we even need to go ask Duke yet? And, if you get to a point where it's like, okay, like, we're interested in this kid, he's a real candidate at 12, and then you go to Duke and you kind of have, because you do have to hear both sides of a story. There's always two sides to a story. And ask Coach K, talk to the assistants there, John Share, whoever else, and just really kind of get the lowdown on like, hey, how is Jalen in the locker room? Like, did his teammates like him? Like, I mean, did he play well with, like, I mean, obviously on court, he didn't have any problem playing with that group, but how was he in the locker room? Like, did people enjoy having him on that team? Like, was it truly just he got hurt and then, kind of mentally got out of it and then left? And you just have to go. I think you just have to do your due diligence. Like, that's kind of all you can say there. But I don't think it should stop you from exploring and going and looking at that. I think you should probably find out what happened and what went on there before you just are like, hey, like, he had a problem at Duke. Like, we're going to not take him.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. Now, let me ask you this too. So is Jalen Johnson your definitive guy? Like, if he's there at 12, you're taking him before, obviously, like if the Mobleys, those guys are going to be gone. Like the Mobleys, the Cades, the Jalen Greens, the Suggs, they're gone. Is he your definitive guy at 12? Or are there other guys who you like more than him?
No, he's my guy. He's my guy. Because I'm really just kind of I'm of the frame of mind they need a big wing. And so that kind of really at 12, the other big wings that you would really like to have, Scotty, Kuminga, whatever, they're gone. Barring something crazy, they're gone. And then so that kind of leaves you with Franz Wagner and Josh Giddey maybe a little bit, and then Jalen. And I told you I'd rather bet on upside right now with this team. I know they can't really afford a swing and a miss, but they also really can't just afford another role player to come in to throw in the starting lineup that like doesn't have top level talent. Like, they're just they'll be at a point then where they're extending all these guys that aren't stars, and then you're in trouble. So I'd rather take basically a 3-year bet on Jalen Johnson and see if he can reach that upside, find the jump shot, find the consistency defensively, and become a star, than take Franz Wagner, who's like high floor, low ceiling.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. One of the I want to talk about this a little bit. We'll stay on this topic for a little bit. So, for me, I think opposite sort of what you said, that they can afford to take a high upside swing and completely miss on someone. Just because I'm looking at this roster, and I'd love to get your opinion on this too. They don't have the guy. They may not even have the second guy. And I asked this to the last person who's on the podcast. Like, you look at the Suns roster, you look at the Bucks roster, right? Their third best players is the Spurs' best player minus DeMar DeRozan as good as that player? And to me, the answer is no. So if you end up, swinging on somebody and you miss, I think that puts you in a position where you have to be honest with this roster and you go, okay, well, maybe we don't have that. Like, maybe we need to rebuild. What is your opinion on the way that this roster needs to be built going forward? Because there are a lot of question marks across the roster.
Yeah, I think there's a path to pretty quick competitiveness. And like, you can kind of tell the Spurs think so too, just because, I mean, you look around and kind of like, okay, they're showing quote unquote interest in Ben Simmons. Like they're in there making those calls. They're going to talk to John Collins. They're going to talk to Lauri Markkanen. Like, they're coming in trying to add dudes to this group. So, they seem to firmly believe that this group is going to be able to do something. So I think you have to look at it in that sense and kind of look at it through the lens of what they believe. And so take a high upside swing and say Jalen Johnson in the draft. Well, okay, so you filled your three there, like you needed your big wing, and they obviously are trying to fill the bigs through free agency. Pirtle got extended. Are going to try to talk to Lauri and John Collins with a ton of money to spend. Like, one of those guys will probably get max, just my guess. So, I think that they're kind of looking at it now as like, okay, we have a lot of money to play with. Let's try to find that next superstar here at 12, or find somebody that can be a top 2 option at 12, and then find another guy that can be a 2 or 3 option in free agency. And then we're a player away, and then we have a lot of options. We can go a lot of different ways, and you have a really solid like foundation built behind those 2 guys already. Because if DeJounte Murray, Derek White, Lonnie Walker, those are your dudes coming off the bench or playing, or starters that are your 4th and 5th guy, like, you can win with that. Like, you can win with a lot of those guys. They're good basketball players, but they have to find those top 2 guys, or else you're going to get to a point where you're extending role players. And you can't really extend role players for long periods of times, or for a long period of time, and eat into your cap and really have no lead on where you're going to find your top 2 options. So I think that this offseason will tell us a lot about what they think about the current roster, and maybe some of the guys on the roster. Like, if Ben Simmons would have to be traded for, like, who would be floated in those deals? Like, you'd have to move somebody. Like, I think a lot of Spurs fans think DeJounte is untouchable. I don't think that that's true, like, at all, really. And
I'm right there with you.
yeah, like, I've seen, like, as soon as the rumors fly, it's like, oh, like, well, listen, DeJounte is untouchable. Like, and it's like, no, he's not. And I'm not even to the point where I think, like, he's our starting point guard on the championship team yet. I just offensively, like, I still want to see more, but we're getting to a point where he may just be what he is. And so, well, that's another topic. But yeah, like, I think that this offseason will tell you a lot about where they plan to go. If they decide to really, really push and go for Ben Simmons, which I don't know if it's a good idea or not. I think it would probably be fine. I don't know that it accelerates anything. But I don't know how you play DeJounte Murray and Ben Simmons on the floor at the same time. Like, it just gives you a bunch of weird fits. And I think what they do this offseason will help, and you'll start to see the roster kind of take form, and you'll be like, okay, this is what they see, and this is where they go next. And I think right now a lot of those questions are unanswered, and we're just going to have to kind of wait and see.
Yeah, that's honestly, that's pretty much my opinion on this roster as well, what they should be doing. And I do think we're going to figure out what they think they have in it. Now, what scares me a little bit is it seems like the last couple of years they've been absolutely convinced this is a competitive roster. This roster is going to make some noise. And I know we can make excuses all day. We can say, oh, well, COVID, or, oh, the injuries. Every team had to deal with that last year. Like, going into last season, I had this team 10th, 11th place at best. And that's exactly where they finished. And I know people want to say, oh, well, look at the schedule. The Grizzlies had the same schedule, literally like 40 games in 68 days. They did it too. They made the plan. And to me, they're in a better position to win than the Spurs are. They got a guy like John Morant. They've got Triple J. They've got some pieces.
So they're almost like the inverse of what San Antonio is. Like, they've got their top 2 dudes and they're ready to roll with those guys. They, for whatever reason, haven't been able to fill out the rest of that roster. And that's why they're not as competitive as they are, right? Or as competitive as some of the top tier teams in the West. And so, but where they are is easier to fill out than where we are. Like, that's point blank. It's much easier to find the guys on the back end than it is to find the top of the rotation guys.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what I'm hoping this season, and I want to try to be optimistic. I'm sort of in the same boat with you where I'm not sure that any of these guys just aren't who they are. They're not just high-end role players or coming off the bench. I hope that they prove me wrong. I hope that they prove us wrong. Hope maybe someone takes a leap. But for me, it's funny. We refer to these guys as the young core, right? Well, DeJounte is going to be 25 here soon. Derek White's already 27. Jakob Poeltl's 25. And the only guys who are really young are Lonnie Walker, Keldon Johnson, and Devin Vassell. I mean, if you want to throw in Trey Jones in there, you can. I'm not 100% sold he's going to be a backup point guard if he can't learn to shoot even a little bit, because teams have pretty much ignored him completely when he has been in the game. But like Devin Vassell isn't a high usage guy, right? And Lonnie Walker hasn't shown much. So what are we looking at?
Well, and the worst part is Lonnie only feels playable when shots are going in. And like, that's not the type of guy. Like, if he's not, like, if shots are not going in, what else is he going to give you? And there's nothing. Like, it's like nothing. And that's why I was kind of like, I saw something on Twitter like, oh, like, we're going to sign and trade DeMar DeRozan to give you Lonnie Walker. I was like, guys, if I can see Lonnie Walker's not valuable to this team, whoever's in another front office who is much smarter than me can see that Lonnie Walker is not valuable. Like, I mean, yeah, and just I think that Spurs fans have to come to terms with the fact that this roster may get blown up in the next few years. Like, a lot of these guys you've come to love may not be here. I mean, they may trade them. They may just send them somewhere else. Like,
yeah, it's gonna be really tough. And again, like, I hope that they prove me wrong. I hope that somebody takes a leap. Maybe without DeMar DeRozan and Patty Mills or Rudy Gay and all those other guys who are going to be coming off contracts. Maybe these young guys get the touches and the shots that people seem to be convinced that they need to take that leap. And of course, they're going to need that to take the leap. We're not going to know what they are until they get that. But what I've seen so far, at least from my perspective, is the guy isn't on the roster. And we can hope all day that happens. And I sincerely do hope that it happens. But from what we've seen, I don't think we can definitively say just because they're going to get the touches and the opportunities means they're going to be the guy. And I know people love to use Tony did it, Manu did it, well, those are completely different situations. Again, like, you had a guy like Tim Duncan, foundational cornerstone for any franchise. You throw him on any franchise, he's automatically a cornerstone that affords you so many more luxuries than when your cornerstone is DeMar DeRozan. And that guy may not even be back next season. And that could be a really rude awakening. Like, even with the touches that they get, like I said, that we're going to figure out what they are. And that may not necessarily mean a positive thing. Hopefully it does, but that may not tell us what we wanted to hear.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's almost like in a term that I've used for my baseball team. It's almost like an evaluation. Like, it's kind of where you're at. Like, I mean, you may roll into this year, and I think they're going to try to spend money this offseason. So I don't know that this happens, but I think it's okay if this roster is run back without DeRozan and you lose a lot, but you find out what you have. Like, that's okay. Like, I think like that is better than running back what they did last year and finishing in 12th overall. Like, that's a better scenario. And I think worst case scenario though is that the front office decides, hey, bring DeMar back and let's go sign a bunch of middling role players and like try to fill this roster out and make it deeper. We still think it can win. That is worst case scenario, because then you get contracts tied up. You don't have a championship team. You're just adding a bunch of extra cogs in a very large wheel. And I think they're all role players. Like, the young core, I think that's role players. I think for the Spurs to be a championship team, Keldon Johnson has to be their third option. Like, that's got to be their third guy, and everyone else falls behind him. So, and then you have to find those top two guys. I think Keldon can be a third option. Like, I mean, last year was year one for him, basically, and he was really good. So I think if you were betting on a jump, it has to be him, I think. Although I don't know what else he can give you that he didn't already give you. But if you were betting on a jump, I guess it would have to be him.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think if you are betting on a jump, it's probably going to be Keldon Johnson. And even that, like, I don't mean to sound pessimistic, but like, a lot of the things that he doesn't do well, they're hard to just get good at, like he's mostly a stationary shooter, but he wasn't good at shooting, from a stationary position. Like his standstill shooting was not great. He's not a great dribbler. He doesn't really create for himself. Well, that's going to be hard to get better at. Like hopefully this Team USA experience, he's soaking up everything he can, learning all the tips and tricks he can, but there are certain physical limitations that certain players have. Like we just got to hope that he develops those things, but I like him a lot. I like a lot of the young guys, and we'll sort of hop back to Jalen Johnson. How do you think that if he's on this roster, he fits? Like, is he somebody who's playing from day one? Or for me, he has to. Like, I don't know what the Spurs are thinking. For me, he has to.
I think he's got to play. I think that the number of minutes is probably determined by what he does once he gets here, if that makes sense. And so what he does in training camp, what he looks like, physically, is the foot healthy, like all that stuff. So I think that he'll determine how many minutes he gets. But I think, yeah, he's got to be in your rotation from day one. You're kind of at the point where, you could throw a kid in the G League for a year when you're drafting 29th. Like, when you're drafting 12th, like you're drafting the guy that's got to come in and play. And you saw that with Vassell last year. Like he came in, it's probably going to be pretty light on minutes early, but I mean, by the end of the year, he was playing a lot. And so, I mean, I think that's kind of the same thing. You have to expect that for Jalen Johnson. And I hope that we can get to a point where him and Keldon can start and play together. Like I hope that that's where we can get and really honestly play pretty small. And then if you want to play Pirtle at 5, fine. That's not what I would do. Like I have my own thoughts on what I would do, but like Pirtle off the bench is fine. If it were up to me, like in 3 years, you're starting like Jalen Johnson's a stud and he's starting at year 4 with John Collins at year 5. And like I think the Spurs are going to offer some pretty serious money to Collins. And it's not going to be about contending in year 1. It's going to be like, hey, listen, like we'll give you your 5-year max. We're going to be contending in year 3 of that contract. You're just going to have to buy into our vision. And so I think that's kind of where I would go. But I don't know. Like, I mean, I really don't know what San Antonio's going to do. But to answer that question, yeah, Jalen Johnson's got to play right away. Like, right away. He's got to be, 18 minutes a game early and develop throughout the course of the year because of those on-court experiences to the point where he can be playing a lot more minutes at the end of the year. Especially if someone like Rudy Gay is gone, like someone's got to fill his minutes anyway. So, you have to come in and be productive. Like, I mean, I think any reasonable fan will expect growing pains. Like I expect growing pains, and that's okay. Like I want like kids, it's going to take these kids time to grow, especially when they're 18, especially when they're early. He'll be 19, I guess, when he starts his rookie year, but still like it's a hard game.
Yeah, I mean, and learning on the fly is so important. And I think like I don't want to say like I think Lonnie and like Vassell and DeJounte and Derek through the years, like them being yanked from games, obviously, like that's Pop's prerogative. Like if he wants to do that, he's going to do that. But I do tend to believe that with these young guys, especially when they're coming in so young, like letting them learn on the fly is going to be the most important. And so like when they are in the G League, I do think there's something that they can gain out of that, being the number one option, getting to do pretty much whatever they want without being yanked from a game. But I do think it's just not the same value as it is in the NBA. And, I'm going to be excited to see how they handle Jalen. And I also want to kind of get this out there, but what does it mean for Luka? Like, what does it mean for Luka Samanic? Like, is he a dude who's going to be playing next year? Like, I don't want to focus on this too long, but I'd love to get your thoughts on Luka because we don't talk about him much on the pod.
Yeah, it's at a point now where I just am not betting on Luka to give you anything super, super productive above maybe like an off the bench guy, like role player. Like I think that a lot of people were hoping he was your starting 3 or starting 4 for the future. Like that's not an option to me anymore. He lights up the G League, which is crazy, but when he plays in the NBA, like there's flashes, but like it's flashes of like just like 1 or 2 things. There's never anything consistent and sustained. And I mean, we're getting to a point. If he becomes a bench guy and he develops into a like significant role over the course of his career, like off the bench, like that's a good thing. Whatever, like you got something out of him, and it's kind of weird. So like we wrote about this a little bit in our last piece for PTR, and so Brian Wright's gone completely domestic, pretty much drafting, and the only guy he's gone Euro with is Luka, and if that doesn't work out, like I wonder if it's like, all right, listen, like we're not drafting in the top 5 and we seem to be striking out every time we take a Euro because you remember they took Milutinov too, and he was a complete bust. Like,
yeah, I think like with him, at least I know that they intentionally drafted him with the idea that he was going to stay overseas so that they could afford someone like LaMarcus Aldridge. Like overseas, he's a top 5 center. He's one of the best centers overseas, and they never bought him over. But like Livio Jean-Charles, now that's a guy who was definitively a bust, right? Like he wasn't good.
Yeah, and so it's like, yeah, like I mean, it would get to a point now where it's like, all right, listen, we're having a lot of success domestically. Like, let's just stay here. Like, we're scouting well here, we're drafting talent well here. I mean, you look at the guys they've drafted, they've all carved out significant roles. I mean, not superstars, but they've carved out roles, and that's a win. You just have to find a way to get that next dude. And if the Spurs decide the way to get that next dude is us just punting on free agency, saving that cap room or whatever, and being really bad next year and getting that dude through the draft, and then we'll play in free agency right after the draft, and then all of a sudden we're going to do one of those quick turnaround type things. Sure. Like that's there you go. You walk in and say, listen, I don't even know what the free agent class looks like after this year, but walk into player X's house and say, listen, we drafted number 3 overall last year, but we've got these guys lined up who now we know what their roles are. We know definitively what they can do. And we also just drafted player Y, who's looks like a generational type talent. And next year's draft will have generational talent. It's like, promise. It's strong. It's super strong. And then you've got this generational talent, and it's like, listen, we can come in, pair you with this guy, and now we've got 5 years to go in, because these type guys are impacts immediately. We may not win in year 1, but year 2, year 3, as this kid develops, we're going to be ready to go. Like, we're going to be right there. And anything that we need to add, we can add by year 2 or year 3 of your deal. And so I think that like that's a big I think that's why like I don't think you can bring DeMar back. Like, I think you either are evaluating talent, adding someone different and trying something new next year, or you're just really bad next year. Like, I think it has to be one of those 3, but I don't think you can run back like DeMar and Rudy Gay and bring them back and be like, okay, listen, like we're going to do the same thing again. Like, you can't do that.
No, you can. I am really there with you. Yeah, no, I don't think you can do that. I don't think it helps you anyway. I think it keeps you stagnant. You're still sort of mediocre, which is like the worst place in the NBA.
But you could even go as far as to say it would hurt this franchise.
Yeah, like long term, yeah.
You're wasting a year of everybody's development. You're wasting a year of Pop's close to his career. You're just wasting everything. Like, don't do that. Like, let him go. Try something different. You know, quite honestly, I'm not bringing Rudy Gay back either, even if you want to try something different. Like, I think you have to let him go too, especially if you're drafting wings, which it seems like I think the Spurs are either going to go. They don't seem to be talking to like any big men. It seems all guard wing type stuff. So I don't think you can bring Rudy Gay back and clog those minutes. Like, leave those minutes open and let those kids develop at the NBA level instead of the G League level. Which honestly, that may be where Luka got lost. To be honest, like, I mean, that may be where he got lost. Like, he never got to play at the NBA level, and he went down to the G League and dominated a bunch of guys that are never going to play in this league. And then he came up, and like, he had already been down for a year and a half before he finally stepped foot on an NBA floor.
He looked good when he came back, though. I'm not going to lie. He did look pretty solid when he came back, like a functional role player. But one of the things, like, I know we keep saying that, like, he dominated, but I think it's really important for like fans, or not just fans, really just anybody who's watching the G League to notice was he didn't really dominate those guys. Like, the numbers suggest that he did, but he's one of those guys in the G League, 22, 11, 2 assists per game, but 3 turnovers per game, 44% from the field, 27% from 3. That's bad. That's bad efficiency. And that's a lot of turnovers. Like, as someone who was there, like, not there, I wasn't in the G League bubble or anything, but as someone who was covering the team, like, it was quite clear he was putting up numbers, but not on good efficiency. It's not like he was really dominating. Right. And so I think it misled people who were like, oh yeah, this guy's been dominating the G League. And so when he came back, people thought he would be better than he is. But I'm right on board with you when you said earlier, like, if he ends up just being a bench guy, I think that's fine at this point, because I'm not sure that he really has a whole lot more in his game. I know, like, people like to say he can put the ball on the floor. Like, he can a little bit, but he's not doing anything special in that regard.
And I think a lot of people are still like waiting on him to like develop into this starting 3 or 4 that's going to put the ball on the floor and be like this, I don't even know what people are looking for anymore. I just think, again, and I have the same conversation about Ben Simmons. I think Spurs fans, we've got to reframe the conversation about Luka and understand like what he is, and that there's a scenario where he is just as likely in 2 years to be out of the league as he is to be a functional player on your team. You just have to cheer for the functional player route now. Like you don't want him out of the league. That's a wasted first round pick. Like just functional player. If any role where he's functional and plays on this team when they're good is, I think you're just like, okay, like it's not what we wanted when we took him, but like knowing what we know now over the last 2 years, like that's fine.
Yeah, and for me, the swing skill for him is 3-point shooting, right? Like he was branded as a 3-point shooter coming into the league, but he really wasn't. Overseas, he wasn't shooting good percentages. He hasn't shot good percentages in the NBA or the G League. So for me, if he never develops that shot, that's the thing that's going to keep him out of he's gone. He's gone by the end of this contract.
He has a pretty shot. Like, I mean, it's not like it's ugly. Like, it just doesn't go in. Like, it's not like the shot's broken. Like, the shot's pretty. Like, fundamentally, it should work. And he just can't find bottoms. And that may be, again, just he needs to shoot more of them, both off the court, or not off the court, but off the court game wise, and also in like just get shots up. Like, spend time with Chip. Like, spend a ton of time with Chip and get shots up. Because even if he just turns into a 3-and-D guy, like off the bench, like where all he does is shoot 38% from three and play effective defense, then that's all you need. That's like that's a role. Like, I mean, people get paid a lot of money to do that now. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think it's almost like a sort of a tall ask. And the reason that I'm sort of skeptical on his shooting is you go back even to his first professional years overseas, you add in his G League games, you add in his NBA minutes. Combined, there's over 500 attempts from three there. So that's a pretty good volume. It's sub 30%. I mean, it's just not good. It's just not good.
Just gotta keep shooting and pray. Keep shooting and pray. Pray that the light turns on at some point. I mean, that's all you can do.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. That there isn't really a lot else we can do but hope that he sort of is working on his game. But before we sort of close things out, let's talk about, Pop in the front office. They're notorious for not making trades, right? But do you think in this class in particular that there's any chance they sort of buck that trend, move up in the draft? And if so, what does that look like, and who are they targeting? Like, what player are they going to go grab? Who do they want?
That's option one for me. Like, yes, I like Jalen at 12. Option one for me is to move up. So, and if you follow me on Twitter, you know this. I'm a Scotty Barnes guy, like through and through. Like, will die on that train that he is an all-star. And I think that if you're trading up, it looks like you're probably targeting OKC, because OKC, there's not really anybody that fits that roster right there. Like, I mean, you're not going to get any of the guards more than likely. And so I think you're probably trying to move up to around 5-ish and targeting either Kuminga or Barnes, because it fits your big wing role. The offense still has to be developed a little bit for both guys, and you're getting a plus defender. You're filling and hoping you can develop what looks like can be an all-star. So for me, it's like, I mean, you're finding a way and I don't know what the package looks like. The rumors are that OKC wants to move back anyway, so it may just be flipping them 12 and maybe flipping them a future second or something. Like, it may not even take a whole ton, because it looks like they're trying to move back anyways. So you move up there, and I want Scotty Barnes. Like, that's my dream scenario for the Spurs, because to me, he's already so good at everything. The question is, offensively, is he going to develop enough to be that all-star caliber player? He averaged 23 points a game per 100 possessions. Like, the dude's not even bad on offense. Like, it's just like, is he going to get to a level NBA wise where he's going to be 23 points a game at the NBA level? And like, I get that. The shot is pretty. I think more work with Chip and the 3-point shooting becomes a really big tool there. And I mean, I think he can shoot 35 to 37% from three. I mean, he's going to be an all NBA level defender. He's 6'9", over 7 feet on the wingspan, I think. So, I mean, I just and then, and he's a playmaker. He understands how to play. The Florida State guys always, just because of the system they play in, they always come in underutilized. Like, we saw Vassell do things this year that you never saw him do in college. I mean, just because of the way they play in college at Florida State. That's like why guys like Patrick Williams climbed in the draft last year. Like, it's just they just don't do a whole lot there. And so Scotty's my ideal scenario. I think more likely is to stick at 12 and take somebody, but I think a trade up would look like trying to trade to 5, or maybe target like Cleveland at 3 on draft night if Mobley goes and they don't want to take another guard. Like if they want to stick it out with Colin Sexton and they don't want to take another guard, then then maybe you try to move to 3 and do something like that and still take Scotty or Kuminga. But like if I had a big board, Scotty's 2. Like if I had a big board, Scotty's 2. Yeah. I think the ceiling could be higher than Cade. I just think Cade's a more sure thing. Like I think Cade is 100% a good point guard. Like I don't think there's a scenario where he doesn't end up being a good to great point guard in the league. I just think, Scotty for me is right behind Cade. I'm not a Suggs believer, and I like Jalen Green and Evan Mobley. I just think Scotty's got a much higher ceiling, and I think he's going to get there ceiling wise.
Oh, that's definitely interesting. I can't say that I have the same board as you, but I mean, that's sort of the beauty of everybody having their own opinions, right? Like I've seen people have someone like Josh Giddey as high as 5. I don't have him at 5, but again, if you look at it and that's what you think, then I think it's cool to have everybody having different opinions, because it sort of gets boring when everybody has the same opinion on the same guys. It's cool that you're high on Scotty, someone who I'm really high on, obviously. Evan Mobley. Like I think if you are at 3, I don't think you can pass on Evan Mobley. I think he's a perfect fit for the roster. I don't think, and this is nothing against Jakob Poeltl. I think Jakob Poeltl's fantastic. He's very impactful. I think he can be an elite backup, but if you're looking at Evan Mobley, I think that's your starting center, and he can be your starting center for a really long time. I think he easily has all-star potential. He's got a lot of defensive versatility. He'd come in and be one of those guys who can potentially guard on the perimeter as a big. There's not too many of them, right? You've got guys like Bam Adebayo, Anthony Davis, and I think he has that sort of ability with his lateral mobility, with his foot speed, with his length, his athleticism. So I like him a lot. I think he has a good shot profile, good rebounder, not a particularly physical kid, but I think people are probably overlooking. Like I've seen some people say, oh, he doesn't have like the work ethic. Oh, he's really slender. That doesn't bother me. I don't really buy into the work ethic thing at all. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of kids in this class and next year's class who I'm really interested to see. I just want to see the Spurs get back on track. Like, honestly, that's my one hope, because covering a team that's losing, you can get attached to guys and you like guys, but it's so much more fun to be covering a team when they're winning basketball games.
Yeah, if they can find a way, like it's for me, like if I were the Spurs, I mean, it'd be trying to find a way to flip and move up and get Scotty and then sign Collins and then be like, all right, time to go. Like, let's go see what we've got now. Like, we've got a bunch of young dudes. We're super young, have a bunch of really good players here. Like, well, not really good, but a bunch of good players here. Like, let's go see what we got. And then year 2, you're still going to be able to see what you got. And then it's like, all right, now we can add and tinker and do whatever else, like figure out what we need. And if you're bad, the plus is you're going to be right back up there again next year, taking another dude. So, but I think that's the route that I would probably go with it, and then just kind of tinker and add and see what goes on. I think it's going to take a max to get Collins, though. So that'll probably rub some people the wrong way if the Spurs end up giving Collins $35 million a year or whatever it would end up being.
Yeah, and I'm not like the biggest Collins guy, but I do think, like, at least I try to remind everybody once on the podcast, because John Collins comes up every single time I'm on, every time we talk on this podcast. The max for him is starting at 28 mil, like just with his service in the league and like his accolades that they use to determine your max. It'd be 28 mil the first year, and it goes up by about 2-3 mil each year. So by the end of that, I don't think it's like unmanageable, but I would be hoping for more. I don't want to get too much, into Collins, but before I let you go here, do you have any sort of other thoughts on the Spurs, their roster, the coaching, Team USA, anything that you want to talk about before we go?
I mean, no, not really in particular. Like, I'm just kind of sitting and waiting for this offseason and seeing what's going to happen. I think the Simmons thing is really interesting because I think the Spurs kind of lack their primary creator offensively. And so I think Simmons could initiate and be that guy. But with that being said, like, I don't know how you get him without mortgaging this team's future. So that's kind of like what it would take to get Simmons. You would have to, like, if you told me they traded DeJounte Alani and 2 first-round picks, I'd be like, okay, I think I can see that. Like, and then you have money to play with. Then you're talking about replacing DeJounte with Simmons and add John Collins, add whoever else, like yada, 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 whatever. And then all of a sudden, okay, now we've got whatever's left of those core dudes and keep going. Like, but yeah, no, I mean, I think it's just going to be, they have so many options this offseason. I think it's just going to be really interesting to see how they do it and how they manage it. Knowing the Spurs, we definitely can't predict what they're going to do, but I kind of expect it to be pretty bland and straightforward. I don't think it's going to be a ton of flair and like headline grabbing type stuff. So other than maybe Collins or Laurie, and if they sign Laurie, I think that's I think Laurie's gotten a bad rap over the last few years. Like the whole he can't even start for the Bulls thing. Well, they got Vucevic. That's why he didn't start. Like they're the exact same player basically. They can't both play at the same time. So I just think it'll be interesting to see how they go. I think if you had to make me make predictions, they take a wing at 12 and they maybe not max, but they signed either John Collins or Lauri Markkanen for big money. And I think that would be my prediction today.
Yeah, that's not a bad prediction. There's a lot of stuff to look forward to this offseason. I mean, we talked about it earlier, but like this could potentially be a franchise, trajectory defining offseason. So there's a lot to look forward to. But before I let you go here, I want you to go ahead and plug anything that you've been working on. Let people know where they can find you on social media, where they can find your content.
So you can follow me on Twitter at WalkerBailey8, and then I'll be kind of finishing out a draft series over the next 11 days with Bruno, and that'll be on poundingtherock.com. So you can find that there, and then kind of working through some things, but me and a buddy of mine will have a college hoops podcast starting in August, and we'll kind of chop it up there. So I'll kind of plug all that through my Twitter, and kind of once we figure out exactly what's going on there, you'll find that there. But it's going to be cool. We've already lined up players and stuff like that. We're going to do some of the NIL stuff and really kind of get into it and do some stuff that people hadn't seen before. And so hopefully take a whole new angle to it and talk some draft stuff there. So if you're a Spurs fan, that's going to apply to you next year, as this team likely is going to have to pay attention to the draft for the next few years. So, follow all those things, and that's all I got.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me. And thanks again, everybody who tuned in for this edition of Alamo City Limits. And for everybody listening at home, make sure to subscribe and leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. We've got a fantastic staff of writers, including Walker over at Pounding the Rock, who do an amazing job of keeping everybody up to date with their favorite team. So check our stuff out. But until next time, take care, Spurs fans.